Do you remember who signed your yearbook? The scribbles, the short greetings, sometimes seem harmless. But, if there's a name you've never heard of, never met, and that person writes, HAGS, I'll be seeing you again. What would you do if that person was standing at your door at 2 a.m.? This is the true story of a mysterious student, a haunting text, and a night none of our group will ever forget. I'm channel name, and this is the story of Samuel Robinson III. Welcome to After 0 Hours. If you're brave enough, stay until the end, but remember to lock the door before you start. The last day of 8th grade always brings with it a special feeling, a little excitement, a little regret, and a lot of innocence. My school that day was busier and noisier than ever. The already narrow hallways became even more crowded as groups of students ran back and forth, laughing, taking pictures, and waving to each other as if this was the last day they would see each other in their lives. Some had tears in their eyes as they hugged each other and said goodbye. Others were excited to be going to high school, to be big kids, and free from the strict rules of middle school. No matter who it was, the atmosphere that day was the same, bustling, hurried, and full of emotion. I was not an outstanding person in school. I was not the captain of any club, nor was I one of the top students or the hottest boy. I was just a normal boy, going to school on time, doing my homework, and having a group of close friends since 6th grade. But even though I was not outstanding, I still had a small joy that day, getting to sign the yearbook. To me, that was the most special thing on the last day. Because my school was so large, over 1,000 students, the teachers came up with a yearbook rotation system to make sure everyone got a chance to sign each other's books. We would leave the yearbooks on our desks at the beginning of the day, and the teachers would collect them and then pass them around to the other classes. Each class would be given about 30 minutes to sign the books that were passing by. At the end of the day, the homeroom teacher would return the yearbooks to each student. At first, I found this method a bit mechanical, missing the fun of running around the hallway, handing out yearbooks to people I loved. But when I got my yearbook back at the end of the day, I realized it had its own charm. My yearbook was now a bit thicker, heavier, because of the handwritten lines. On each page, there were slanted, bold, and light strokes. Each line had its own flavor, passionate, witty, or clumsy. I skimmed through a few pages, laughing at the naive wishes like, "Don't forget me, crazy girl," or "Be handsome in high school." But then, I stopped. On the 8th page, below the portrait, a blank page that had been left blank for a signature and a message, there was a strange line of writing. It was not written in blue or purple ink like most of the other messages, but in black ink, extremely bold and clear, as if it had been written with great care. HAGS, I'll be seeing you again. The first 4 letters, HAGS, are a common acronym that everyone knows. Have a great summer. But the next part gives me goosebumps. I'll be seeing you again, I'll be seeing you again? See you again? For what reason? And more importantly, who wrote this message? Below the inscription was a very clearly signed name, Samuel Robinson III. I frowned, a light sweat forming on my forehead. The name didn't sound familiar. I couldn't remember seeing anyone named Samuel in my class all year. I couldn't remember seeing anyone named Robinson in clubs or extracurriculars. I looked around the classroom, as if hoping for someone with the same name, or a familiar face. But no, nothing matched. I flipped back to the front pages to check the class roster. No Samuel. I could remember only one Sam all year, but it was Samira, the Pakistani girl across the row. No Samuel Robinson III. I started flipping through the yearbook, looking for a picture of Samuel, and to my surprise, I found him in the 8th grade class portraits section, which contained portraits of all the 8th graders. I flipped through the pages until I saw a face that was unfamiliar but that stood out. A boy with curly brown hair that fell over one side of his forehead. His eyes looking sideways with a strange look, half sadness, half mockery. Just below the photo was the name I had just read in the text, Samuel Robinson III. Wait, I've never seen this person in my life. I searched my memory again. Impossible. With such a large school, there were bound to be people I would never meet. But a face like that, I would definitely remember. Maybe it was the name, Robinson III, it sounded like royalty. Or maybe it was the way he looked into the camera, not the awkward way students usually look, but a look that seemed to know too much. as if he was waiting for something. At the time, I wasn't really panicking, just a little chilly and uneasy. I simply assumed that this could be a student in another class, someone I knew from afar, or simply the wrong yearbook. Still, the words stuck in my head, haunting me more than any other message. I'll be seeing you again. It wasn't a simple wish. It was more like a promise. Or a warning. At that time, I was too innocent to think too far ahead. I closed the notebook, put it in my backpack, and tried to focus on the joy of the end of the school year. But what I didn't know was, that line wasn't written for fun. Hours later, as my friends and I retreated to my basement for a slumber party, I didn't think about it again. But if I had known who Samuel Robinson III was, and why he wrote what he did, I probably wouldn't have laughed another minute that night. That evening, after a long, emotional, chaotic day of graduation ceremonies, I returned home with a strange sense of relief. Although the story of the name Samuel Robinson III and the odd yearbook entry still lingered in my mind, I pushed it aside. It's probably just someone's prank. I told myself, it's a little creepy, but it's nothing serious. My house has a large basement, which my dad converted into a living space, with a mini projector, Bluetooth speakers, an old treadmill, and some unfinished exercise equipment. It's the perfect place to hang out with friends without disturbing anyone in the house. Especially at night, when my parents have gotten used to leaving us alone downstairs while they rest on the third floor. That night was a sleepover that had been planned for a week. Kevin, David, and Kieran, three of my closest friends, practically brothers, were all allowed to stay over. Each brought a bag of pajamas, a couple of cans of soda, a big bag of Doritos or Lay's, and of course, my old console that had been the source of countless memories. A PlayStation 3 with a scratched copy of Call of Duty, Black Ops 2. We started around 8 p.m. It was like a typical sleepover. Laughter whenever Kevin, team killed someone in the game. Screams when David got headshot. And the smell of snacks everywhere. I forgot the words in the yearbook. I forgot that strange name. I was just a kid living in the moment, no worries. No calculations. As the clock ticked closer to 2 a.m., things had quieted down a bit. Kieran was practicing his rowing on my dad's rowing machine. Kevin was rolling around on his sleeping bag pretending to be a snake ninja. And David was on his phone, texting someone I assumed was his girlfriend. Just then, suddenly and without warning, a knock came at the door. Knock, knock, knock. The knock was loud and clear. Not the main door upstairs, but the cellar door, the back door that connected our basement to the back garden. It was a white metal door with a safety lock, rarely used except when we were taking out the trash or taking out tools. Everyone fell silent immediately. I turned my head to look at the door. A cold gust of air from somewhere blew across the back of my neck. A series of questions flashed through my mind. Who could be knocking at this hour? Who would go around the back of the house to knock on the basement door? How did they know we were down here? At that time I still didn't think of Samuel. I just felt strange and uneasy. Who is it? Kieran suddenly shouted. I turned to him, glaring at him. He had just done what I feared most, revealed that there was someone in the basement. Anyone standing outside now knew that there was someone awake in the house. And on this floor, there was a long silence. We held our breath. No more knocking, no answer, just the sound of my own heartbeat, loud and clear as a drum in the middle of the night. Then a voice rang out. Go out the back door. I'm out here. That voice made me shiver. It wasn't deep. It wasn't loud. It wasn't aggressive. It was soft, airy, like a teenage boy inviting me to a sleepover. It sounded like he was our best friend, like it was all a misunderstanding, and I was the one who'd forgotten the invitation. I looked at David. He raised an eyebrow. Kevin looked dumbfounded. Only Kieran smiled, still thinking someone was teasing him. Go see. Maybe it's Brian or someone, Kieran said. I shook my head. No, not our friend. That voice. I've never heard it before. I stood up and cautiously approached the basement door. Through the small slit in the side of the door, I couldn't see anyone's face clearly. The light from the backyard was dim, leaving only a silhouette standing upright, hands in the pockets of a hoodie. I hesitated. My mind told me to turn back, go upstairs and tell my parents. But curiosity and peer pressure kept me going toward the kitchen door. There was a small window next to my kitchen door, sliding sideways, just big enough to talk without opening the door. I opened it slightly, just enough to let the sound through. "Who are you?" I asked. One step. Then the shadow moved in front of me. And I saw that face. Samuel Robinson III. It's him. There is no mistake. The messy hair. The dull but bright eyes. The smile. Strange but almost harmless. "I'm Sam. I signed your yearbook. Did you read it?" I froze. Kevin whispered. "Who is it?" I didn't answer. I just repeated the words in my head. "HAGS. I'll be seeing you again." He smiled. A strange smile, not entirely friendly, nor entirely frightening. He continued. "I've been following you for a while. We could be good friends. Just haven't had the chance yet." At this point, I wasn't as scared as before. I was really panicking. Every instinct told me not to continue talking. I tried to stay calm and asked again, "How do you know my house?" This time, Samuel didn't reply. The faint smile disappeared. His eyes became empty. Before I could say anything else, David stood behind me and said, "Go away, you pervert. Who are you, stalker?" That statement was the trigger for an uncontrollable rage. Samuel's face changed in an instant. His calm eyes were now filled with anger. He gritted his teeth and shouted unimaginable things. "You guys think you're better than everyone else? You, the guy your girlfriend just dumped, right? You think you're having fun?" I backed away, slamming the window shut just before he could reach me, banging on the pane so hard it shook. He roared, like an animal. The window seemed about to shatter. We panicked. Kevin yelled. David backed away. I stood in front of the window, locking all the latches. And then, the most familiar sound rang out, the sound that could free us from our nightmares. My parents' footsteps came from upstairs. Within seconds, Samuel disappeared. I had never seen anyone change his emotions so quickly. 1 second, he, Samuel Robinson III, had been smiling softly, looking shy like a lonely kid looking for friends. After a single sentence from David, his face had suddenly become twisted, angry, and indescribably strange. It was as if he was no longer the boy from school, but something else entirely, alien and dangerous. As soon as I slammed the window shut, Samuel slammed his hands on the glass, making a loud noise that made Kevin scream. Kieran quickly pulled his sleeping bag in front of him as if it was the only shield he could think of in his panic. David, who had been the one to say the insult, didn't say anything more. He stood there, staring at Samuel through the shaking glass with wide eyes. Samuel roared, banging on the window. "Who do you think you are? I know everything. I know everything. You laugh behind my back. You would never let me in, would you?" I felt my hands shaking as I locked both bolts. I had never seen anyone pound on a door with such raw rage. It was as if he had waited a long time, months, to stand in this position, to let everything he had pent up inside out. But what kept me glued to him wasn't the screams. It was Samuel's eyes. There was no trace of innocence or timidity in those eyes anymore. They were white, wide, as if filled with anger. But there was no fixed point of focus. He was looking through us, not at us. As if he were talking to something else. A short silence. I could feel his lips moving, but no sound came out. I put my ear close to the window. And, sure enough, Samuel was mumbling something. Some kind of indistinct language. As if he had made it up himself. Or learned it somewhere. Then suddenly, he stopped. His eyes stopped moving. His hands dropped. And he smiled back. This smile was no longer the friendly one from before. It sent a chill down my spine. It was the smile of someone who knew he had power, who was manipulating other people's fears, and who thoroughly enjoyed it. Samuel raised his hand, pointed to the right, and pulled out his phone from his pocket. I thought he was going to call someone, or make a threatening video. But no, he held up the phone so he could see the screen. It was a photo of my own house, from across the street. At night, it was clearly taken from afar. The angle was almost from above, maybe from the second floor of a house across the street. In the photo, the light was still on in the third-floor window of my house, indicating that it had been taken not long before. I choked. "You were following me?" I shouted, unable to contain myself. Samuel remained silent. He turned, slowly backing away from the window, his eyes still fixed on us. He pulled up the hood of his hoodie, and as the backyard light fell on his face, I saw a faint cut running down his left cheek, as if someone had hurt him. He whispered, no longer shouting, but his voice was loud enough to pass through the glass. "I've been here all week. It's only tonight that you guys noticed." With that, he disappeared into the darkness, as if he had never been there. No one in my group dared to breathe heavily. Kevin stammered, "What the hell just happened?" I turned back to him, my voice hoarse. "It's Samuel Robinson III. It's the name in the yearbook. It's the one who left that inscription." David's hands shook as he sat down on the floor. Kieran pulled the curtains and locked the bolts around the basement. I had never seen my friends so truly panicked. About 10 seconds later, footsteps sounded from the stairs. My parents were awake. My father was wrapped in a blanket, his hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. My mother was still in her nightgown, her arms wrapped around her chest in panic. "What's going on? What are you guys making so much noise about?" I rushed up the stairs, almost sobbing. "There's a stranger in the backyard. He knows me. He knows our house. We went to school together. He's gone, but I don't know if he'll ever come back." Without waiting for another word, my dad ran down to the basement, opened the back door, and rushed out, wearing only pajama pants and bare feet. The yard light came on. We stood watching from the inside, our hearts pounding. I wanted Dad to get Samuel, but I also hoped no one would touch him. 5 minutes later, my father returned, breathing heavily. He shook his head. No one in sight, quiet as a graveyard, even stray cats running by. But no people. I felt a layer of ice spread in my heart. Samuel was gone, but the fact that he had stood right there in my house, knowing my name, my face, even what my house looked like at night, that was something I couldn't erase from my mind. None of us slept that night. We locked all the doors, jammed chairs into the handles, turned off the lights, and huddled together like a herd of baby animals. By dawn, we could only sleep for a few minutes, constantly startled by the sound of wind, imaginary knocks on the door, or the sound of footsteps coming from nowhere. As for me, when I close my eyes, the first thing that appears is not Samuel's face, but the words he wrote. "HAGS, I'll be seeing you again." After Samuel disappeared from the window, the basement fell into a suffocating silence. No more games, no more crunching chips, no more innocent laughter from 4 teenage boys. Just the sound of our ragged breathing, as if we were breathing in tandem for fear that if we breathed at the same time, something out there would hear. My father returned from the backyard after about 5 minutes of fruitless searching. He assured us that it was probably just a prank, but I could see in his eyes that something was wrong, as if he didn't believe his own words. My mother held my shoulders, rubbing them gently, as she had when I had a fever as a child, but the trembling in her hands told me that she was as scared as I was. After a brief discussion, my parents decided not to call the police right away. They were afraid of causing unnecessary panic, afraid of being seen as making a big deal out of it. And because, perhaps, in their minds they still believed that this was just a troubled boy who had not caused any real harm. But to me, my friends, and especially after confronting Samuel directly, we knew this was not normal. This was not a joke. After my parents returned upstairs, we sat on the basement floor, circling the now-off game console. No one spoke for several minutes. I could still feel Samuel's hand pounding on the glass, and hear the glass vibrating as if it were about to shatter at any moment. Every time the wind blew in from the yard, I flinched. I sat next to David, the only one who had the guts to talk to Samuel, even though his words were the trigger for the other guy's rage. Kieran, perhaps the calmest person in the group, suddenly suggested, "Open the kitchen window again and check if he really left." I immediately objected, but Kevin, who was known for his curiosity, agreed, and as they both began to convince me, my rational mind told me that if I didn't check it out myself, I wouldn't be able to sleep all night. So I reluctantly got up, told them to stay behind, and walked quietly toward the kitchen window. I pulled the curtain up slowly and peeked through. There was nothing to see but darkness and the dim yard light that fell on the fence. There was no one there. No Samuel. A little peace of mind again. I hesitated, then opened the sliding window a crack, just enough so that someone outside could hear me. No sound, no movement. I whispered, "Samuel, if you're still there, I just want to know what you want." As soon as the words were spoken, a figure quietly slid into view from the right, not stepping out of the darkness like a horror movie character. No, Samuel walked very slowly, step by step, hands in his pockets, head bowed, as if embarrassed. He stood about a meter away from the window, tilting his head to look at me. "Oh, so you read my message?" I gripped the edge of the door. His voice was the same as before, warm, gentle, a little timid. The strange thing was, if I hadn't witnessed his rage a few minutes ago, I might have believed him to be just a lonely boy looking for friends. But I knew, beneath that soft voice was something much darker. I nodded, hesitantly saying, I saw the message. But, I don't think I know you." He smiled lightly, not angry. "No, you don't know me, but I know you. A long time ago." I got chills. "How long?" Samuel looked up, his eyes suddenly serious. "Since the day you sat alone at the table by the window in Ms. Wilson's math class. When you got lost in the presentation group. Remember? No one picked you. I saw, and I know how that feels." I paused. The scene was real. One day, more than a semester ago, I arrived late to class because of a stomachache. When the teacher asked for groups, the groups were full, and no one gave up their seats. I sat alone, and I was very embarrassed that day. Where were you sitting that day?" I asked. Samuel smiled softly. "I wasn't in the class. But I knew. I saw it through the door. I have a habit of wandering the halls. There are classes I don't need to go into. I started to see things going wrong." Samuel continued, his voice beginning to take on a more intense emotional tone. "We could be friends. You know, if you looked around, you would see people who wanted to be your friends. But no, you only hang out with David, with Kevin, with the kids who always laugh the loudest in class." I tried to explain that I didn't mean to abandon anyone, that I was just a kid. But I knew, he didn't need an explanation. He already had the script in his head, and everything I said was just his response to that play. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. "And if I hurt you, I'm sorry, but you can't just show up like this, scaring us. You know that." Samuel was silent for a moment. Then suddenly, he pulled something small out of his hoodie pocket, a small yearbook. Like a shortened or photocopied version of the one I had. He turned to a page I couldn't see clearly, and held it up for me to see. In the dim light, all I could see was my name and a small picture of myself. "I've written your name over 200 times in here. In my head, in my notebook, in my dreams. And now, here I am, almost touching it." I backed away, slammed the window, and turned to my friends and shouted, "No more opening, no more talking, lock everything." Samuel knocked on the door again, but only once this time. Then he laughed, but not like a human laugh. It was a long, cold, distorted hiss. "See you later, old friend," he called back, then disappear. As Samuel's twisted laughter ended, a silence fell over the room, as if the world had stopped breathing. I slammed the window shut, my hands still shaking. There was only one thought in my head. He's not just some strange student. He's a real threat. At that moment, I don't know where I got the courage from, but I turned around and shouted, "Lock the door. Lock it all." Kevin immediately ran to the basement door and barred it with the latch. Kieran pulled the thickest sleeping bag underneath as if it could withstand anything. David sat down on the floor, holding his head in his hands, sweat soaking his collar. I climbed the stairs quickly, my legs almost giving out. In the dim light of the hallway lamp, I could clearly see my mother standing at the top of the stairs with a pale face. "What happened? What was that noise downstairs? You just screamed?" Mom asked. I didn't say anything, just pulled my mother back, panting. "Samuel, he's still out. He's coming back." "Mom, call Dad down. Hurry." Less than a minute later, my father appeared with a flashlight in his hand and a very serious look in his eyes. Without a word, he hurried to the back door, turned the lock, and pushed open the wooden door that had not been used for a long time. When the door opened, a cold wind blew in, making the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. "Who is it?" my father shouted out into the dark yard. The flashlight scanned every corner, every small bush near the fence. No answer. Not a soul in sight. He took a few more steps into the garden, the flashlight beam swinging constantly, illuminating the area behind the house. We stood at the door, watching his every move. The backyard light was on now, but it was not enough to shine deep into the space between the garden and the fence next to the small forest behind. I swallowed. Just as my father turned the flashlight to the corner of the garden, near the pile of old bricks my family used to build the barbecue, he shouted, "Stop, stop." We were startled. I rushed out the door, just in time to see a figure jump over the fence. With the speed of a wild animal. There was no mistake. It was Samuel. He ran so fast that I didn't even have time to realize if I was actually looking at him. The flashlight only caught half of his back, his messy brown hair fluttering in the wind. And then, he disappeared into the woods. My father ran after me, but he stopped just short of the fence. I saw him standing there, flashlight in hand, the light shining into the deep blackness of the trees. Nothing, no rustling leaves, no running feet. Samuel had disappeared into the night. He turned and walked quickly towards us. That kid ran like he was being chased by a ghost. He jumped the fence like a leopard. The way he ran, he wasn't normal. My mother was standing right behind me, her hands gripping my shoulders as if afraid I would be sucked away at any moment. My father looked at us, then announced, "We're calling the school tomorrow. We can't let this go." That night, no one in my family could sleep. We gathered our blankets and pillows, moved them up to the second-floor living room, left the lights on all night, and dozed like a group of night watchmen. Every time a car drove by or a tree branch hit the window, we all woke up. I sat on the sofa, my eyes glued to the front door camera, the old one my dad had installed to check on delivery men. But all night long, Samuel never returned. There was no sign that he was still around. However, the feeling that someone was watching me from somewhere in the dark never went away. The next morning, my parents contacted the school board. The call lasted almost an hour, and I could only make out bits and pieces of what was being said from my dad's room. Expelled. How long? No one knows where he lives. He snuck into school? When? Finally, my father came out of the room, his face more serious than ever. He spoke slowly, each word falling into silence. Samuel Robinson III was expelled, almost 2 months ago. I widened my eyes. But, he's in the yearbook? My dad nodded, because it was printed earlier. His name and picture are still there. But he hasn't been legally present at school for the past month. And on the last day, no one saw him enter through the main gate. Kieran sat at the foot of the stairs, muttering, "So he snuck in, just to write that note?" My father confirmed. No one knows when he appeared or where he went. The invigilator checked the entry and exit books, and there was no name. He had sneaked into one of the classes, signed the yearbooks, and then disappeared. We were silent. A chill crept up our spines. I asked, "Does the school have his address? Or records?" Dad shook his head. "The address you gave was wrong." When the school tried to contact him, no one answered the phone. One of his former teachers said his family moved so long ago that it was unclear if he was still in the state. The school is cooperating with the police in the investigation. But, he looked at me, troubled. It's like he never existed. That saying haunts me to this day. Never existed. But I know I saw him. Heard the knock. Saw his burning eyes through the glass. I can't forget the phone held up, with the picture of my house at night. From that day on, I no longer looked at my backyard with a carefree eye. Every night, I pulled the blinds shut, locking all 3 latches. I started leaving a nightlight on, something I had given up in 5th grade. And I still kept the yearbook. But it was no longer a keepsake of my childhood. It was more like a testament, a slash into my 14-year-old memory. And the name Samuel Robinson III seemed to be etched into the page with someone's fingernail in the darkness. The morning after that night, the atmosphere in my house was heavy, as if the whole family had just experienced a terrible dream that everyone feared would come true again. No one spoke much at breakfast. My mother sat peeling an apple, cutting into the skin over and over again, her eyes looking out the kitchen window as if waiting for Samuel's silent shadow to emerge from the bushes. My father kept checking the security cameras, rewinding the footage from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. But everything was just a blank blackness. Nothing. No one. I sat still, holding a cup of hot milk but not drinking it. My eyes were glued to the yearbook in front of me, open to the page with the message from Samuel Robinson III. The black ink was still sharp. "HAGS, I'll be seeing you again." Not a joke, not a schoolboy prank. It was a warning, a promise, a calculated signal. My father called the school office at 8:15 a.m., just as they were starting work. The call lasted more than 30 minutes. I could only hear the beginning from the living room. But then he went into his office and closed the door. When he came out, his face had changed completely, no longer the anger or panic of the night before, but a look of grave concern, like someone who had just learned something beyond his understanding. The school confirms that Samuel Robinson III was expelled 6 weeks ago. He began. Expulsion for what reason? I asked, though the question had already left my mouth and my heart was clenched. My father hesitated, as if trying to choose the gentlest way to say it. There are many reasons, he said, not a single incident, but a series of unusual behavior over many months. He pulled a printed piece of paper from his pocket. I guessed it was a memo or email the school had sent, and read it back to us. Samuel frequently skipped classes, showed up unexpectedly for classes he wasn't signed up for, showed signs of mental instability, didn't follow teacher instructions, and, this is the most serious part, he was caught sneaking into the teacher's office twice for no apparent reason. "What are you doing sneaking in?" I asked, my mouth full of bitterness. My father shook his head. Nobody knew. He didn't steal anything, didn't damage anything. He just stood there, silently, as if waiting for someone to come in. One of the teachers said he even whispered something into the filing cabinet, then disappeared before they could stop him. I felt my hands go cold, my fingers gripping the armrests of the chair. "So why not inform the parents?" I asked. "The school called his family," my mother interjected, "but they never answered. The address on file was blank." I turned around. "Blank? What do you mean?" My father sighed. "I mean, Samuel's file was very poorly filled out. There was no photo ID of the guardian. The home address was a vacant lot when the school sent someone to verify. It was just an abandoned house. No one had lived there for at least a few years. Neither of us said anything more for a long while. My house, once a warm home, now feels like a shelter where people try to stay calm while waiting for the second storm to hit." That afternoon, the school sent a representative to meet my family in person, Ms. Ruiz. The student counselor, a woman in her 40s, petite but with serious eyes. She arrived with a thick file. My parents and I sat around the dining room table, while Kevin, David, and Kieran sat silently on the living room sofa, just a few feet away. Although we weren't invited to the table, we listened, because what was being revealed seemed too serious to ignore. Ms. Ruiz began. "First of all, I want to apologize for last night's incident. What the family went through was serious, and the school has every responsibility to support them. But I also want to make it clear, this is not the first time we have received complaints about Samuel." I looked up, surprised. She continued, "At least 3 students this year have reported that Samuel has been stalking them." "What exactly?" my father asked, his voice low. "There was a 7th grade girl who said she saw Samuel standing in front of her house, just staring in the rain for 15 minutes. Another student said she found Samuel standing in her garage, but when she called her parents, he disappeared. And another found Samuel keeping a detailed record of his daily activities in a notebook." Both my mother and I were silent, stunned. "And that wasn't reported to the police?" my father asked sharply. "We were going to do that," Ms. Ruiz replied, "but no one had any concrete evidence. And Samuel disappeared from school after being caught sneaking into a classroom at night." I squinted. "Wait, at night? You mean, he used to come back to school at night?" Ms. Ruiz nodded. "The security guards saw a shadowy figure moving through the hallways on security cameras at 2 a.m. one day in March. When they checked, no one was there. But after replaying the footage, they saw a person wearing a black hoodie, barefoot, walking through the second-floor hallway and disappearing into the medical room." I fell back in my chair. My father clenched his hands into fists. "What about his family records? His parents' names? Has anyone ever met them?" Ms. Ruiz shook her head. "We have never met the parents. All communication has been through email. And those addresses are no longer active. We suspect that Samuel may be living with an unofficial guardian. Or, he may not be living with anyone at all." A thought flashed through my mind. So, if no one knows where he lives, no one has ever met his family, no one can verify his personal information, then is it possible that Samuel never belonged to this school? No one answered. No one objected. That question hung in the air, like a truth filled with too many gaps. That evening, I opened the yearbook again. I turned to Samuel's page. I looked at his portrait, that look in his eyes, that crooked smile. That half light, half shadow face, and suddenly realized something. There was no other signature next to Samuel's picture. No message written to him. No one else mentioned him. It's like I'm the only one he signed. The only one. And perhaps, to Samuel, I was the only one who existed. After meeting Ms. Ruiz and the chilling revelations, I began to look at the whole thing in a completely different light. What scared me the most was not the fact that Samuel had shown up at my house or was following me in the dark, but the fact that no one knew who Samuel really was. A student with no verified address. A record with no clear guardian. A name that left no trace after being expelled. And most importantly, a person who seemingly never existed, except in the memories of those he haunted. Since that night, my family has taken a series of safety measures. My dad installed a new security camera system with motion sensors, and we replaced the backyard gate with an electronic code lock. I started carrying pepper spray with me to school, and my mom always reminded me never to walk alone. I am not a carefree child anymore. The sleepover group, Kevin, David, Kieran, had changed dramatically. 2. There were no more light-hearted jokes or pervert stalking comments. Because we all knew full well, something truly terrifying had happened. And if just one of us had acted differently that night, the outcome might not have been as peaceful as it was now. But the strangest thing is the complete disappearance of Samuel Robinson III. The school cooperated with the police in a semi-official investigation, but in the weeks that followed, no one could find any trace of him. The old address was an abandoned house. The phone number was inactive. The email address no longer existed, and no one in the neighborhood had ever seen a boy like Samuel living around. Some teachers tried to recall his face, but most were vague, as if Samuel had never actually been present in the classroom. An old teacher of mine, Miss Bartley, even said something that gave me goosebumps. I remember that name being on the list, but when I tried to picture the face, I just saw blank space. That yearbook is now tucked away in my desk drawer. I don't open it anymore, but I don't throw it away, because it's the only remaining evidence that Samuel was here, existed, wrote those haunting words like a twisted prophecy. I still remember that sleepover night, when he screamed, "I've been here all week, it's just tonight you guys noticed." That sentence haunts me to this day. It makes me think more about the things that exist around us that we don't notice. People who silently observe from afar. Eyes we never meet. Shadows that pass by in the crowd. Seemingly strangers, but have been with us for longer than we think. Time flies. I started high school in a different school, a district away from my old one. My family was slowly getting back to normal, although sleepless nights still occurred occasionally. But since the day Samuel disappeared from my backyard, no one has seen him again. No one ever recognized him in any classroom, neighborhood, or community activity. There was also no news about a missing teenager named Samuel. It seemed that Samuel Robinson III had evaporated from this world. Like a shadow of memory. Like a story that only those who had experienced it believed to be true. Now, as I tell you this story, I no longer tremble. I have overcome my fear. No longer have nightmares at night. No longer jump up at the sound of the wind hitting the glass. But I'm not the kid I used to be. I learned that not everything that is scary comes from big things like wars, natural disasters, or monsters. Sometimes, the scariest thing is a look from afar. A message from an unknown source. A person standing at the door, knocking 3 times. And the lesson I want to share with you is this. Speech balloon, listen to your gut. When something makes you feel uneasy, no matter how small, trust it. Never discount your instincts. Don't hesitate to talk to an adult, a teacher, or someone you trust. Speech balloon, observe the people around you. Maybe somewhere in the classroom, someone is being forgotten, being left out, and that isolation can be the source of heartache. If possible, be the first to reach out. A greeting, a question, can sometimes change a fate. Speech balloon. And finally, don't ever think, it won't happen to me. Because I used to think that too. Until Samuel Robinson III signed my yearbook, looked straight at my house in the middle of the night, and whispered, "I'll be back." I don't know if he's really back, or if he's watching me from somewhere. But I do know one thing. I'm ready, not for revenge, but to be fearless. Clapperboard, if you find this story worth pondering, leave a comment below. Pushpin, have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever felt like someone was watching you but couldn't prove it? Red heart, please like this video to support me. And subscribe to the channel to receive more true, emotional and creepy stories like this. Loudspeaker, and don't forget to share the video with people you think need to hear this story. Who knows? It might help them avoid another Samuel Robinson. See you in the next stories on After 0 Hours channel. Have a peaceful night, and if someone knocks on your door at 2 a.m., don't open it.